now tapped in with the introspective father and son duo. Last name may be strange, but never strangers to the game. Adjust the listening devices and keep it loud.
Coming in, flex. I just wanna win, LABB, who we running with, 2233, I'm on 10 again, state your name.
Hello, and welcome to another installment of No Strangers to the Game. By the time you be watching this, it'll be Super Bowl Sunday, and hope you have a great Super Bowl, safe Sunday, and enjoy this time with limited family, as we're probably still trying to be social distance and things like that. Today's episode, we're going to kind of just break down some of the interesting topics, at least from our perspective, about the Super Bowl and what that day means in this country as well as to us personally. I think the interesting thing about this is the Super Bowl has always been kind of a litmus test for the year and for where the country was. I think there have been Super Bowls where you just felt like, it was a really good, fun time. There was other Super Bowls where, for whatever reason, it just didn't go well and the year was kind of off. So I think this will kind of be an interesting Super Bowl because of the climate of the country. And it'll be interesting to see how it goes down and what the general, mood or feel is towards the Super Bowl, before and after. But let's get into it. I mean, the first thing we wanted to talk about, and I wanted to get across is, as I said, it's weird because it's just a sporting event, but it does have a really, big impact on, I guess you could say, the mood of the country, if that makes sense. I know I'm going to talk about my experience first in terms of when I was growing up. The Super Bowl was like a national holiday. I remember Pastor Costin specifically. He would always say when it was Super Bowl Sunday and he was in church preaching, he said, "I'm going to get y'all out of here early because I know everybody wants to set up for the Super Bowl parties and get ready to watch the game." And I was always like, that's crazy that, that he's taking that into consideration. But that's how big of a deal it's always been, since I was, a kid. Football is the biggest sport in America, and everybody, and that's the thing about it, is it pulls such a different demographic. Mom probably watches one game a year if she doesn't, walk through the house and we're watching the game, but everybody, I don't care who you are, watches the Super Bowl. So for me, it's always felt like a holiday, really. It was like we knew we was doing something for the Super Bowl. Was it like that back, when you were growing up?
Not to that degree. Growing up, particularly for me, growing up with largely women in the household, it wasn't a big deal. And so there was times when people got together, I guess, depending on who was playing, and they congregated, they watched it at somebody's house. And so it was a big deal. And there was times where it was just like, oh, well, y'all gonna watch the game? Me, why watch it? Might go outside and just start playing, So for us as kids, as we were growing up, when I got over to about my teens or in high school, I tuned in a little more. And then again, it always, for me, depended on who played. If it was a team or teams that I was interested in watching, then I would definitely tune in. If it wasn't, I may watch it, I may not. So for me, it always kind of varied. I always knew it was going on and I always paid attention to some degree, but it was more or less depending on who was playing and sometimes just the mood I was in.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The reason I think of it as more as a holiday too is because and I guess that's the difference between when you grew up and when I grew up. But I think nowadays, regardless of who's playing, people are going to tune in and watch. People are going to look. And it's not even, I don't even think half the people that watch care about the game. It's just to feel like you are part of a cultural event. Like, this is what everybody's going to be talking about on social media. And, for at least the next couple of days is who won the Super Bowl, what happened, what commercials were the funniest, and stuff like that. And so I feel like people are like, I have to watch it to be a part of that.
Well, I think like with sports in general, it's just become more commercialized. These major corporations, the NFL and these sports leagues have become more adept at marketing and promoting these events to where they become iconic events. And people, across the globe, particularly here in the U.S., they tune in, whether it's something that they really have an interest in, football, or they may have an interest in the commercials or the halftime show. So there's always a little bit of something that can draw someone in to tune in to see the event. Somebody may, the halftime show, let's go. And, they come in and watch the halftime show, but they at the Super Bowl party.
Yeah.
And during the game, now they be talking or drinking or doing something other than actually watching the game. So it has a little to offer for everyone, whether or not they're big football fans or not. It just become an event that people tune into.
Yeah, I forgot about the halftime show. That's a really big cultural event too, because you always have, I guess the Super Bowl always tries to pick, the biggest star of the year or, currently, and have them, perform. And I think you have, and then the national anthem as well. I can think about some iconic national anthems from Whitney Houston to, didn't Patti LaBelle do one?
Yeah, you've had a number of people.
And then you have halftime shows like I wasn't alive for, but I'll never forget even watching the video of Michael Jackson's halftime show.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the national anthem, considering over the last few years how controversial it's been. And, it just made me think that, that's one of the things everyone used to tune into and be like, we want to hear who's singing the national anthem. The last couple of years, it has been a little interesting because of the controversy surrounding it, the kneeling and the protesting. So it'll be interesting to see this year how that goes, considering all we've dealt with over the past year with racial
and the most interesting thing for me would be how the NFL treats it, right? I think the players kind of taken. You have guys who kneel, and it's just become kind of expected or, not a big deal as when Kaepernick first started doing it. But I think what would be interesting to me to see is how the NFL handled it. Will there be a message? Will there be something, on the jumbotron behind them of we stand against race? Something like that that's become expected of these leagues now. Will the NFL take part and use the national anthem to do that? Or will they just be like, nah, we just going to stick to what we know best?
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. I do agree, because I know after the whole George Floyd thing, they did come out in support of it, or they didn't look down upon it. So it'll be interesting now with the Super Bowl and what just recently happened, the Capitol building, and just kind of attention, what the NFL is going to do. Are they going to shine a light on it, or are they just going to be like, we're not going to pay a whole lot of attention to that right now. Let's slide that. Let's make sure we don't create a controversy where we don't need it. And so
that's the thing, though, is like everybody right now is looking for that type of stuff. So if it's not there, people are going to notice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's people that are, they look for it. They want to make sure that it's a part of the messaging and the imagery within the league and the game itself. And if it's not there, I think they'll be not called out on it, but people will take notice. And there's a lot of smart people working in this league. So they have to take that into consideration. So I know it's on their mind, and it'll be interesting to see how they respond.
Well, if we're talking about it, I'm sure they're talking about it on some level, because their brand depends largely on how they, handle this situation.
And because, and as we've talked about it before, it's become almost a bad business move to not be with this movement, right? I mean, every business we knew this summer was releasing statements in support of Black Lives Matter and all of these different movements and things. So although it may have just been a business move, it was a bit of support, and it was bad business to not say anything. They were calling those companies out. It's like, where's your statement at, Yeah. And so it'll be interesting to see. Like you said, if we're talking about it, we know they've thought about it. And so I know whatever decision they make, they can't claim ignorance. Like, oh, we just slipped our mind. Like, no, whatever it was a conscious effort.
Well, but, that'll be one thing to tune into. So tune into the national anthem and how that's dealt with.
Yeah. Quick nugget. I'm pretty sure that the Super Bowl is the second largest viewed sporting event in the world. It's the third, but depending on the year. But I believe the first two is the World Cup and then the Olympics when they come around. So that's how big it is. And we think of it as an American sport, but I mean, it draws a lot of eyes from around the world. But this year in particular, I think is interesting because a lot of people are talking about this GOAT versus baby GOAT thing. And because
GOAT versus the kid.
Yeah. Everybody thinks Brady's the GOAT all time, 6 Super Bowls. Probably don't have to tell people about his resume. And then people believe that, and I'm one of those people who believe that Mahomes is probably, one of the best quarterbacks we've already seen, come through. If he's able to be consistent and keep going and stay healthy, he'll probably go down as the greatest quarterback of all time. And he's got a great supporting cast around him to hopefully stick together and do it through the next, however many years. But
Right.
But, I mean, it, because everybody thinks Brady's the GOAT all time, 6 Super Bowls. Probably don't have to tell people about his resume. And then people believe that, and I'm one of those people who believe that Mahomes is probably, one of the best quarterbacks we've already seen, come through. If he's able to be consistent and keep going and stay healthy, he'll probably go down as the greatest quarterback of all time. He's got a great supporting cast around him to hopefully stick together and do it through the next, however many years. But Let me ask you this. I'll start it with who you got.
Well, I'm rooting for Kansas City, and being that my team are the Raiders, we hate Kansas City, but I'm a Mahomes fan, and then I'm not a big fan of Tampa Bay since they beat us the last time we was in the Super Bowl. So, and I'm not a Brady hater, but I'm not a big fan. I think he's a great quarterback, and obviously he knows how to win. But he's also been surrounded by some pretty solid teams. So I think, I'm kind of middle of the road on Brady. I don't challenge his greatness, but in terms of me supporting and rooting for him, he's gotten some pretty good breaks at times. Calls, especially that tuck rule when they kept us out of the Super Bowl. And since that was what, 98, I believe.
Wasn't it 02?
Well, maybe early 2000s. But I know it seemed like the organizations went in different directions. Patriots went up, and then the Raiders just fell.
Okay, well, you don't put that fully on Tom Brady's tuck rule now. Y'all did some things.
Put it like this. It had an impact. And there's a correlation.
Okay, yeah, I give you that.
Just looking at how those two organizations went in different directions, largely because the Raiders just couldn't get past that old school way of thinking. As the game passed them up, Al Davis just wasn't willing to make those changes. But long story short, I'm rooting for Kansas City. I like Mahomes, and I think it's going to be a good game. And I just hopefully that the weather isn't a problem and that they're able to go out there and really, run and shoot.
Yeah. I have been deemed a Brady hater. I wouldn't say I'm a Brady hater, but what I do hate is the amount of credit that Tom Brady gets that I don't think he fully deserves. Now, I will acknowledge Tom Brady is one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever live. He's, done enough to win throughout his career. Obviously, 6 Super Bowls. You can't argue with that. I do believe he's been a part of a great system for over 20 years with the Patriots. But in terms of, if you can honestly sit there and say that you watch Tom Brady play football and you think, oh man, he's the best to ever step on a football field, I think you're out of your mind. And so for that reason, I do a lot of arguing against Tom Brady in terms of trying to discredit him. But if everybody was on the same page as me, they're like, yeah, he's a great quarterback. Not the greatest, but he's a great quarterback. He's had the greatest career in NFL history. Kudos to him. I'd be like, cool. But when people start saying how he's the greatest, then I have to knock him down a peg.
Well, what's the criteria? I always say, what's the criteria, and then we can evaluate what we consider great. I think, he would probably have some of the greatest accomplishments. Is he the most talented? No. And so that's when you begin to have that argument. Are you talking about the talented? Are you talking about the accomplishments? Are you talking about both? So, it's always one of those ongoing arguments because I don't think the criteria is ever really set and established for you to have that discussion. And I think for many people, it's fun to have that.
It is, argument. But that's the thing. It says and that's why I think Tom Brady's kind of split a lot of people, and most people are on the other side that he's just the greatest. He's just been dubbed that because of career accomplishments, right? Super Bowls, he's top 5 in passing yards. He's top 5 in touchdowns thrown and all these things. And like I said, he's been one of the most consistent quarterbacks for the past 20 years. And that's got to mean something, which is why, in my eyes as well, he's one of the best quarterbacks to ever play. But to just call him the GOAT off of career statistics when you've been playing 20 years and you've been a part of a great system for 20 years, and you have a few other quarterbacks that I think weren't a part of his greatest systems, more talented, and were probably, I would say, not more consistent, but less of a hindrance to their team, because at times Tom Brady can throw a lot of interceptions. He doesn't move the ball down the field that well. I think there are other quarterbacks that I look at and say, hey, all time they're better. But this is definitely an interesting matchup, and I can see how it draws eyes because people are like, oh, this is, the current GOAT versus, the kid kind of coming up and challenging for that spot. Now Mahomes, I'm going to get off Brady, and I don't want to talk about that too long. But Mahomes, I think Aaron Rodgers to me is the best quarterback I've ever seen because for the past, I don't know how many years he's been starting quarterback, but 10, 15 years or more, he's shown great consistency in terms of playing at a high level. Sometimes he had good teams, sometimes he didn't. He won a Super Bowl, a lot of playoff appearances, just hasn't been able to get over the hump, but it's not like he played terrible in those games. So you can't say he's just not clutch or anything because if you look at the stats, he's more clutch than Tom Brady, but we ain't gonna get into that. But I do think that Mahomes, I look at some of, like we talked about it before, some of the throws he makes and some of the things he does on a football field, and I'm like, we've never seen that before. We've never seen that.
Yeah, I mean, I think he has not only the physical skills, but he appears to have the leadership skills and the intangibles. And that's one of the things, that I'll throw in when I look at great players or successful winning players. I look at the Magic Johnsons. I look at the Larry Birds. I look at the LeBron James, the Michael Jordans. They've seemed to have a way to propel their teams to win, whether it's been physically or the intangibles through leadership and how they get their guys prepared and ready to play. And so those are some of the things that I look at, and I think that Brady does for his teams. Confidence is a huge thing to have in sports. If you don't have confidence, it's hard for you to go out there and think you're going to win. And so I think those are some of the intangibles that these guys have. And Mahomes, being so young, it appears to me that he has that type of charisma and that leadership to be able to will his guys to win, but at the same time, making them believe that they're going to win, and that obviously probably coaching staff and a lot of other things, but they seem like they have that. He seems like he has that leadership quality to, get his team to be successful as he has done over the past couple of years.
Yeah. And the thing that probably most excites me about Mahomes is that I think of two different things, two different skill sets, or I guess advantages when you talk about Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, who are consistently talked about as some of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. I think Aaron Rodgers is the physical tools, man. He can make every throw. He's got a cannon for an arm. He's, decently athletic, so he's mobile. He's good between the ears. I think Tom Brady, looking on the other side, man, he knows how to run a system. Like you said, the intangibles, the leadership to be able to put confidence in his players. He's clutch. I ain't gonna lie to you. Tom Brady is somewhat clutch. But more than that, I think Tom Brady's had, once again, like I said, a great system for 20 years. He's had great teammates behind him, good defenses. And that's what I'm seeing with with Mahomes is that, hey, he's got the physical tools. He's got everything that Aaron Rodgers has, in my opinion. But now he's also got a great team. He's got a good offense with him. I think, Travis Kelce may go down as one of the best tight ends of all time. He's got Tyreek Hill, who's probably already one of the fastest receivers to ever come through the league. He's got Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy behind him as coaches. By the way, get Eric Bieniemy a job in the league somewhere. They're doing that brother wrong. But I just think all of that collectively, if Mahomes is able to stay healthy and stay consistent, he'll go down as the best quarterback of all time, man. That's the way I see it.
So let me ask you, from a statistical standpoint, and how the number of championships always play into that whole GOAT conversation. What does he have to do to be recognized at that as the GOAT when it's all said and done for him?
I mean, it's tough to say. I mean, it's like, I think football is one of those things where career accomplishments are taken into consideration, but because a lot of times football's players' lifespan isn't that long, you know what I mean? Being consistently good versus just having an amazing peak is, it's tough to weigh out. But I do think that Mahomes, because he's a quarterbacks usually last, a bit longer in the league. I think he should be able to get, he's already probably up there in a few of these stat categories, but, in terms of all-time passing yards, touchdowns, and touchdown to interception ratio is a big thing for me for quarterbacks because, if you throw touchdowns and you don't throw interceptions, that's how you win a lot of games. But I think in terms of Super Bowls, I don't think there's any amount needed because that isn't a determining factor in a great player to me because that's such a team statistic. In basketball, it's different. One guy can affect the game greatly and probably enough to win championships, I think we've seen, as long as they have a decent supporting cast. In football, a quarterback is only on the field half of the game, and half of that, they're probably just handing it off right or left. There's 10 other guys on their team and 11 other guys on the other side of the ball that need to do their job in order to help him win. And so I don't think there's a number of Super Bowls. What I will say is he's got a team, like we've talked about. He's got a coaching staff. If you look at it and you say, man, Mahomes is probably the only thing holding them back from getting another 2 or 3 Super Bowls, which I don't think that'll ever happen. But if that's the case 5, 6, 7 years down the road, then it'll be tough to give him that kind of, I guess, GOAT title because, you can't hold your team back. But I don't foresee that happening. And so for that reason, I mean, if he's consistently doing what he's doing right now for another 5, 6, 7 years, in my opinion, he'll be the greatest quarterback I've ever seen. He's already the most talented quarterback I've ever seen. All I need to see is more consistency.
All right. I guess that's fair. That's fair.
I want to talk about – go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I want to talk about – because we can go on and on and on about that argument. I want to talk about the economic impact of the Super Bowl itself, and especially the year 2021, given everything that's going on. I know you have a few stats on what the Super Bowl represents economically to the league and stuff like that, but it just seems like this year especially is going to be different. But in what ways?
Well, in just the limited information I have as far as how the economic impact of a Super Bowl in a city or a region, it ranges anywhere from 200,000 to 300,000 up to, 500-600,000, not thousand, million. So yeah. 200 to 300 million up to, $500 to $600 million for that region in terms of revenue being generated. What actually stays based on what is spent, that varies. So for instance, if a city generates, 300 million, they may, profit or bring in, 50, 60 million, give or take, as they minus the expenditures put out, to put on the event and to host it. So, so that's a big chunk of revenue for a week or two, to where it's being provided in that particular city community. So that's huge. There's economists and there's others who may argue how much is really being generated and what the impacts, and they go into a little more detail on, where is that really, an economic factor that, produces a type of revenue that, being projected and sometimes quantified. So this year, it's going to be interesting just because of the COVID and the impact of that, and probably be fewer events, parties. There'll be fewer people at the games. So that'll be interesting to see what that looks like, economically for Tampa Bay, for that region, from a financial standpoint.
Yeah, I find it interesting. I mean, like we talked about, that's the biggest thing, right? Is COVID this year and stuff like that. But I'm wondering, as people, well, that's what I'm wondering is if will people flock to the city, right? Because Florida has kind of been this, open state in terms of COVID restrictions. They haven't closed down too much. And so I would think there would be a decent amount of motivation for people who aren't, I guess, afraid of COVID or who haven't necessarily thought that the rules need to be followed. There'd be a lot of motivation to say, hey, you know what? There's something going on in Florida. Florida's the place to be. Let's go check it out. And so I think that may draw some people. But then again, there's probably another faction of people who are like, nah, we are afraid of COVID. We're worried about it. And it may drive them away. So will it even out or will there be less, more? I think that's an interesting thing to see.
I think for the NFL, I mean, obviously ticket sales, you won't be able to sell out because they're not going to have a full stadium, right? No. So from that standpoint, it's going to be down. I think some of the event planners really not sure what's going to happen. So they're probably being a little more modest with the events that they're holding because it's really not certain as to what that's going to look like. Who's going to show up? Are people going to show up in mass? Or are they going to be like, we're going to set this one out and hopefully next year we can come back when it's, things are a lot better. So I think overall it'll probably be down. How much and how significant, I don't know. So I think the commercials will probably be interesting to see how with, all that happened this year. I think there's going to probably be some pretty interesting commercials that will reflect on some of the things that took place over the year, that will shine some light on things, and that will probably be hilarious, to, be a parody on some of the things that have been so serious, but looking at it from a comedic standpoint to, say, hey, this is what happened, but we can laugh at it. So So economically, it's going to be, I believe it'll be down overall.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things about the Super Bowl versus other big time major sporting championships is the Super Bowl has become a production, it's almost like a movie from start to finish. And even before and after, you have so much that goes into it that can draw your eyes. I watched the finals this year, and as much as I love basketball, the commercials probably weren't, as entertaining. So I would, go on my phone during the commercials or find something else to do during the commercials, go to the bathroom. Before the game and after the games, the commentary was so-so or what have you. But the Super Bowl, man, they've done a good job of making sure that from start to finish, you have to watch what happened. Who did the like we said, the national anthem? Who's doing the halftime show? What commercials are going to be funny? What commercials aren't going to be funny? Because they even do the thing where you vote best commercial for the Super Bowl and stuff like that. And so it's become such a production as opposed to other sporting championships that they economically. But that's the interesting thing too for me is, okay, so obviously we know what the pool is, and the demographic that the Super Bowl pools is so wide ranging that as you have a lot more people hunkered down in their homes, I imagine the contract for that space, with who does the Super Bowl every year? Is it CBS or ABC? I think it's CBS. I don't know.
I'm not sure.
But either way, the contract that they negotiated with the NFL has got to be probably one of the biggest ever, because it's like, look, you got millions of people who can't leave the house, who are laid off of their jobs and sitting in front of a TV set anyway. The numbers that we pull this year should be pretty monumental. And so for that reason, I wonder how much money that contract will do, and if that makes up the difference. I don't think it'll make up enough difference to where they gain more, but will it compensate for some of the loss in ticket sales revenue that way?
Well, it all depends. For the cities, that's not going to do them well. The region in which the Super Bowl has been planned, but for the NFL, for the TV network, I think that will probably be an area where it's a possibility for it to go up and be even more effective and productive, because people are more than likely be around the house, be at home, and being that the Super Bowl is such a big event anyway, most people typically plan on watching it. So I think that is an area where you could see increases in improvement overall. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the Super Bowl, man, it'll be interesting to check out this year, I think, for the game itself, but also just for so much else going on around it that goes with the Super Bowl. And like I said at the beginning, I think it's a good litmus test for where we're at and what people are feeling. Like you said, some of the commercials may have some social undertones that, you may look at and say, well, what are you trying to say by that? Or will they poke fun at some of the, I guess, more serious situations and kind of calm the nerves? I think it'll be an interesting I guess you could say, study to see what kind of cultural impact the Super Bowl has, because it has one every year.
Right. That's a good point. I agree with that. So it'll be fun. I think it'll be interesting to say the least. Now being that we've been kind of locked down or, quarantining for the last year almost, these type of events on TV, really become more exciting or more interesting in looking at them, because, you just don't have that, at least I haven't had that, ability to go out and just do the things that we normally do. So now these type of events become even more exciting and even more interesting for us to look at and want to be a part of and see. And so it'll be interesting also with some of the changes that are being made, how that'll impact future Super Bowls and how things are done. So I think there's a lot of interesting things that'll come out of this, and be able to tell us what the future looks like on some level, and how the changes, or if there'll be changes, as a result of what's currently taking place.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, this is a week before, so it'll be interesting to see from next week perspective how we viewed it, and that may be how we intro the show next week. But for now, man, I think that's a good discussion about a lot of probably the different aspects that people probably never even thought about with the Super Bowl. But it'll be interesting to see how it turns out. And once again, we appreciate you guys for tuning into this episode and all past episodes, and hope you keep tuning in. Thanks once again.
Peace.
Make sure you like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. so you're notified every time we post a video.